Hello everyone, welcome back to The Long Road. Before we get into an example battle, what we're going to do is just take a look at the forces that would be involved in scenario 3 of the ambush. What we have would be 3 militia elements for the Lycans. They also have Ledetta in her human and her Lycan form. There's also going to be Tantani and another Lycan warrior group, and they will also have an RPG group and an RPD gunner group. Now remember, because these are platoons, this isn't necessarily only one unit or one person. There could be a few in there, such as an RPG team. It doesn't mean that every single person in that platoon has an RPG, but think of it as like an RPG augmented platoon. So they have some close assault and infantry firepower, and then they also have some anti-armor power too. Same with like the RPD unit. There's a mixture then of soldiers with regular rifles and some that have some of the RPDs. So it just doesn't mean only RPDs attached. Alright, then for the Soviet player, they have the 4 Ural trucks that they'll be escorting. They have 3 T-64Bs. Oops, stuck that in the wrong spot. They have 3 BRDM-2s and 3 BTR-70s. They also have 3 infantry. So those will be the combatants. I'll go ahead and line them up on the board. I'll show you where they're going to be placed. Actually, when we play, I'm going to put them kind of along the road to get the Soviets right into combat right away. And then for the scenario, the Soviets initially could set up along this northern road, or they could set up along this southern route. And the idea is they want to exit off the map board here on the west. And so most people probably would follow the road. However, that also might be, what would be expected by the Lycan player who's setting up an ambush. So when you play, that's going to be up to you to decide the best strategy to get your troops from the roads across the map and off. Now remember, when we set up and start playing, the Soviet player only gets 5 movement points until they get into contact with either an ambush by the Lycan forces or one of those IEDs explode. So what I'm going to do is set up, make an assumption that the Soviet troops have already advanced a little bit across the board, and we'll put them near the woods so that the Lycans can get right into ambushing and attacking. Alright, we'll be right back. What we've done is gone ahead and laid out the Soviet convoy. I have a T-64 here. He was kind of all by himself. We have here a BTR-70, which has an infantry unit loaded, and they are escorting a Ural truck. Now that is 3 units, but because the infantry are loaded onto the BTR-70, that does count as a singular unit as far as stacking goes, and so that's the 2 combat units there. These 2 hexes are the same, with a BTR infantry loaded escorting a truck. Here we have a BRDM-2, it's escorting a truck. Now I could have also loaded the infantry into the truck to give direct support. However, because the trucks are so horribly defensible, I didn't want to lose infantry that easily, so we'll just leave them off to the side. Now we also loaded the infantry because they can add 2 high explosive fire factor. Gotta learn to speak, to the high explosive factor here of the unit there with at close range. That way they can, I guess it's they have firing ports on some of these vehicles. It's not very accurate, and it's really only effective at super close range. So either like adjacent, or it says in some situations you might even be part of overruns where you could use the high explosive fire factor. I can't get rid of that word, high explosive fire factor. Then you have your BRDM-2 and the Ural truck, which we already covered. Then you have your 2 BRDM-2s and then 2 T-64s leading the way happily down the road. Now, with in mind that there were 2 IEDs that the Lycan player could place, since I don't have someone to randomly determine for me, I figured what I could do is just quickly go down the column and I gave myself like a 30% chance of there being an explosion to show that, and I didn't know which one it would be. So I'm going to roll this die 10, and we'll just try each hex. I'll try to roll somewhat quickly. Oh, well, there it is right there. So it was going to be a 0, 1, or 2, and there's an explosion. So this is attacked with a high explosive or APF value of 12, and you would pick a unit in there, and so it doesn't matter, they're the same. So we'll just go ahead and attack this one. Now, the combat, we'll see how it works with vehicles, but in this case, we're going to go straight to an attack value of 12. And we subtract the 4 armor that's on the, or 8 armor that's on the vehicle, and that's a difference of 4. So we're going to come down to the 4 column. Then you roll a die 10. This vehicle has a -1 on the armor factor. So when we roll, we'll subtract 1 from this. So we rolled an 8, which is kind of hard to see in the shadows there. Subtract 1 is a 7. So we cross-reference the 7 along with the 4, and that's 1 potential hit. The Soviet player, they have a morale of 3, so we're going to have to roll a die here, oops, and see if we can block that one. Oh, we rolled a 7. Now if we had taken more hits, we would have to roll more dice and hope we would get some 3s or lower. Even with like the higher Lycan morale of like a 4, or the Americans, the NATO, they would have a 4. So the morale difference between the two forces isn't that much, but sometimes at one point can make a difference. So what happens is that unit becomes disrupted. If we had caused more hits and we had failed more morale checks, then that could have been reduced or even destroyed. However, boom, lead vehicle in the convoy is disrupted. Now remember, these are platoons, so it's not just one singular vehicle that's been hit. It could have been, but there could be, depending on the nationality, it could be a platoon of 3, 4 vehicles. The truck counters themselves represent maybe 5 to 7 vehicles. So even though there's a disruption, or if something's destroyed with a wreck marker, it doesn't mean necessarily that every single vehicle was destroyed. It could mean 1 or 2 were destroyed and 1 is retreated, but it's affecting the overall combat capability of the unit. So disruption just means that that group of vehicles is in disarray from a huge explosion that just happened. Alright, so that would be the opening initial part of the turn, is the player, if they had a hex written down where that was hidden, they could detonate it. So we'll just go ahead and detonate it right there. Now what we'll do is follow the sequence of play, which I've got here on the turn record chart. So I just move that off to the side so it's not on the table or on the map board. Now it says we roll for initiative. So this would probably be about 1, possibly 2 turns in, because with 5 movement points, they probably moved a little bit further than they should have. So we're just going to put the turn record on, say this is the start of turn 3. So initiative, we're going to roll 2 dice, and I do have my own dice that I'm using just so I can track easier, say like NATO and, oops, red for Soviet. So blue for NATO, red for Soviet. We'll see who rolls highest. If it's a tie, then, let's put that in camera view, then the person that had initiative last retains it. Let's see, I have to figure out maybe who had it before. In thinking about who would have initiative last turn to carry over, I meant to say that the player who did not have initiative last time would get it in case of a tie. So we'll go ahead and say the Soviet player has initiative, so I'll place that on the turn track that you can't see. So we have initiative. You can also modify initiative if you had placed one of your focus markers, and then you could spin the die to re-roll as many times as you want the initiative roll, depending on what side the marker's on, 1 dice, or re-roll it twice if you really wanted initiative. But we'll just roll, and we'll say that the Soviet player gets initiative. So as we go through the turn sequence, we would draw action cards. Now at the beginning of this scenario, it did say that the Lycan player had 2 action cards, so here's 2 that they had. Ferocity is really good, so without reading all the details of the cards, the one that really grabs me is ferocity. So Lycans are very, very strong, and normally they cannot reduce, as far as combat damage, armored vehicles. But this ferocity card actually will allow them during close assaults to reduce armored vehicles, because now their supernatural strength is letting them just rip parts and components off a tank and can damage it. So we would draw, and we'll go ahead and draw another one. Oh great, now they have Frosty. So they were saving some cards up. Now the Soviet player, according to the scenario, started with no cards, and they would have drawn each turn. So since this would have been turn 3, that means turn 2 and turn 3 they would draw cards, and they used the bottom. So they have a For the Motherland, raise the morale of all Warsaw Pact units by 1 for the current turn, and they got a rally here. And this also tells you at what point they could use that particular card. So they now have their 2 cards, or then the Lycan player has their cards. Now it's the rally phase. This For the Motherland is actually really useful because there's going to be combat coming up. Normally the Soviet player wouldn't know when they're being ambushed, but since the idea is that the special scenario rules say that the Lycan player will attack from woods, now that they're pretty much surrounded by woods, this might be a good time to play that card. So that will raise their morale from a 3 up to a 4. So I'm going to play that and discard it, and with my memory I'll probably forget that I did that, but I'll hold on to this rally because it says I can play it at any phase to rally 1 unit, which might be good to remove a disrupted marker, for instance. I will hold on to that because the rally phase will give us a chance to roll for free, and if that fails we'll go ahead and play the rally. So I'm going to hold out for just a second. So now we have action cards, and it is the rally phase. Since this is the only unit right now with a disruption, we'll roll. So I'll just take one of the standard game dice and roll. And remember, we are with a 4 now because I played For the Motherland, and I rolled a 4. So I can save that rally card that I just picked up. So disrupted, good. Rally will let you get rid of the disrupted markers, but it won't let you flip a reduced unit back to its full strength. Once those vehicles are destroyed, they're kind of gone for that scenario. Alright, after we have checked for any rally, we would then go to the fire phase. Now fire is an alternating sequence of combat where the initiative player can fire first with a unit, and then, or a stack depending on how you do, like maybe group fire, something like that, and then your opponent would fire. Also with the special scenario rules, it says that the Lycan player can place units whenever they want on any phase essentially. And since we're at a fire phase, there's nothing to shoot at. Well, that'd be kind of boring. So the Lycan player is going to drop some units and a Lycan and an RPG and an RPD and some militia. So the RPD seems kind of weak as far as firepower goes. It's only a 2, but it has great range. But if I was to deploy him far away in woods, he really can't shoot through woods. So we're going to drop it here so we can shoot at a truck. We're going to drop an RPG. Not much in the way of stopping power against a tank, but could maybe put some hurt on a BTR, for instance. Lycan, we're going to put a Lycan right down here in the woods. Now they don't necessarily shoot, but he'll be able to move into combat. Now it does say in woods, and there are woods on either side of that road. And since I've got some ferocity cards, we're going to sacrifice, I don't know if it's a sacrifice, but we're going to drop a Lycan in there and see if it can tear some tanks up. They have an extremely high close assault combat factor, and then add a ferocity, and he'll be able to reduce some tanks if I roll well. Then we can drop some militia units in here. We'll drop one here, and we'll drop one here. So I'm not necessarily needing to focus on the BTRs that are in those hexes, but it's the trucks. Well, that one's got 2 BRDMs, but it's the trucks that we want. And you can target, when you attack a hex, you can pick a specific unit that you're targeting, and we'll be able to destroy hopefully a few trucks. But now that those units have placed, then we would go to combat, and a person could say, well, since the Soviet player had passed on shooting, because at the time there was no targets, and then the Lycan player just dropped stuff in, we'll go ahead and give the Lycan player a chance to shoot at some things. Now, combat is also pretty simple. What we got to do is look for essentially matching combat values here. Now, with high explosive, it's pretty simple. There's not so much a defense value on the vehicle for the high explosive fire or machine gun fire. I'm not going to shoot at BRDMs. Those actually do have an armor value, but these trucks, that's what I'm looking for. You can attack them with high explosive fire factors or armor piercing factors, and the militia themselves don't have armor piercing values, so they use their high explosive factor. And you can group up with a unit that's adjacent to you to attack. So you would pick like one unit to be the lead, and we'll say this 4, because they're the same. We'll just say this 4, and then if you add in a undisrupted unit, or non-reduced, I should say, not disrupted, but like a non-reduced, then they would make a 2-column shift to the right for an attack bonus, and they would both be marked fired when done. Also, we just look at the range band. So this 4 is a green color, and our combat chart tells us that short range is adjacent, and that will also give you a 1-column shift to the right. So before you apply any modifiers to the left for defense, you apply all positive shifts to the right. So we know we're starting with a fire factor of 4. You get 2 shifts for the assist, 1 for short range. So that would be 3-column shifts. So you'd go 1, 2, 3. Put you on a 10. Now they are on a road. Oh, actually that was lucky. That's totally clear. Nothing there to benefit them. They're on the road, so it's going to be really hard to claim the woods for defense when you're on the road, because you're not off of the road in the woods. So they're pretty much going to be all open attacks along that road, which means if we were to look at a road, so this would tell us if it's blocking. However, if I was shooting like across the road, any amount of distance, trees along the road, that would block line of sight. Then it says here the movement cost is 1, but you do get +1 if the entire movement allowance is spent on the road. So these Soviet trucks, when they first started, might have had 5 movement points, but they could have moved 6 hexes. And again, I moved a little bit further than they should have just to put them in combat. And again, you look over here if there's any modifiers. Now actually it does say, look at that though, column shift to leg, none for the road, but it will give you per other terrain in the hex. Well, that's good. Good thing I read that. So even though they're on the road, they can, I guess, pull off and defend themselves. It says per other terrain in hex. Well, the other terrain in the hex for that empty square is nothing. So clear gives nothing. But this hex here where it's got road and woods, I guess the woods are close enough that they can take advantage of the woods. And we see there that that gives for leg units a 2, but these are all armored vehicles, so they're only going to get 1. Well, let's try to remember that. So here out in the open, no defense for that truck. So we're going to roll a die, and we rolled an 8. You want to roll low. So we had, 3 shifts, so I'm going to look at the 8, cross-reference over here on the 10, and that does say 3 hits potentially there. Oh, okay. So the truck has to try and defend those. They have a morale of 4 now. Look at that. They block all of those. Well, lucky them. So we're going to go ahead and put fired markers on those 2 units. And there's different ways you could mark it. If you like to try and keep down on clutter, you could just stick a fired marker across those 2 so you know that both of those have fired, and then just put that RPD unit on top, letting you know that he has not fired yet. We would then take a look at the Soviet player and what they want to do. Well, they probably want to shoot back. What they're going to do is with the BRDM is they're going to take a shot here at this RPD unit that hasn't gone yet. Maybe they can disrupt that and prevent it from doing something. So we'll actually do this group because there's two right there. So they're going to take the basic high explosive factor of 6, get 2 column shifts for the assisting unit that's firing with them, and it's also close range. So that's going to be 3 column shifts. So they're going to start at the 6, 1, 2, 3, puts them on the 12. Now this defending unit is in the woods, and it is a leg unit. And so we remember leg units get a 2 shift. And if we needed to, down here it does mention units in force hexes do not receive any benefit when targeted by artillery or mortar barrage. That's a little subnote. We're fine. So we'll go ahead and do 2 column shifts back to the left. So we're going to go onto the 8. So we roll 1 die. It's a 7. Cross-reference with the 8. That is also 3. So the Lycan player is going to roll 3 dice for that RPD unit. And they had a 4 morale. So the 3 would be successful, and the 6 and 5 are a fail. So what we do there is we'll mark this stack of BRDMs as having fired, and we'll put a disrupted marker on the RPD. Now, when it comes to marker management, it's not like super complicated. It just might seem a little bit of a hassle, but this is how I do things to help me remember. Anything under a marker is affected. So this unit here is disrupted. This militia unit was not disrupted, but it had fired. So these hexes are big enough that you can kind of arrange things a little bit, and as long as you and your opponent understand what's happening. So in this group here, both of these have fired, but because this militia, well, I guess what you could do, because no, that RPD hadn't fired, so I'm just going to leave it like this. They're in the same hex, but these two have fired. That one's disrupted, and we're good. Now it would go back to the Lycan player. They had an RPG here, so they're going to take a shot at one of these BTRs that's escorting the truck, and they're going to fire with their value of 4. Now with the high explosive factor, when you fire with that, you take the number of the high explosive factor and you go all the way to the right till you find the matching column or the closest matching. But with the armor piercing firepower, you take their armor attack value and you subtract the defense of the vehicle. So that's why I put the RPG against the BTRs, because the BTR is considered armored, but it's very lightly armored. It's a 0. So 4 minus 0 is 4. So I'm starting off on the 4 column. I would look for any benefits of like terrain, and they are also in the open, so they're just going to take a shot of 4. And because it is adjacent, it's short range, so RPG is going to get 2 shifts. Where's the short range? It's 1 shift to the right, so it's going to go from the 4 to the 6 because they're adjacent firing. And they rolled a 0, which is actually a really good hit. These color codes would indicate special cases. So for example, this orange, even though I rolled a 0, it's on the orange, you get a critical hit for artillery and mortar strikes. Or same here, critical artillery hit. There's also references to rubble and smoking wrecks. And like the blue means that the whatever was shooting a missile might be out of ammo for missile firing. So I don't think any of those colors will matter with this particular battle. But I did roll a 0, and it was on the 8. And that's 7 hits, potentially. So that Soviet player has to make 7 saves. Wow, that was a devastating RPG hit. 2, 4, 6. I'm going to borrow one of my extra die 10s that I have here. Red for Soviet, good luck for them. Let's see if they can survive the ambush. And there's a few saves, actually a lot better than I thought. So remember, they've got that card, so their morale is 4. So the 4 is a save, the 2 is a save, the 1 is a save, 1 is a save, and that 3, surprisingly, is also a save. And wow, that is a lot better than I thought. So the first hit is a disruption, second hit is a reduce. I actually thought that was going to remove that entirely and make a wreck. Now, because they are carrying infantry, infantry suffers the same fate. So they're gonna, the infantry inside is also disrupted and reduced. So we're just going to stack like this, reduced, which will affect its combat value a little bit, and it is also disrupted. Now, because the truck is not disrupted, we'll just temporarily swap these around. Ta-da! And we'll put a fired on the RPG. The militia probably could have joined in that fight, but I just thought I'd hold them back to attack the truck separately, because I thought the RPG would totally remove that BTR. Okay, so it would go back to the Soviet player. Well, the Soviet player is unhappy with that, so they're going to attack into this stack, but they're going to attack the militia because the militia hasn't gone yet. But they do have the infantry loaded, so they will contribute by adding 2 to that high explosive fire factor value. Wow, I'll get that right at some point. So it's going to be a total of 8. Also, because it's point blank, they get a, well, not point blank, but short range, they get 1 positive column shift to the right. So when you are starting off on 8, 1 column shift to the right is a 10. The militia is in wood, so that's 2 shifts back, 1, 2, puts them on a 6. Now, if I hadn't augmented the firepower with the infantry, then their overall results would be a lot weaker. But the infantry did add enough oomph to help push them up a column. But we'll see if that makes much of a difference. We're going to roll 1 die 10. A 1, that's a huge result. So we go 1, cross-reference with the 6 they're on, and that's 5 hits. So this militia has to make 5 rolls. Let's see if they are as lucky as that Russian BTR was. And yeah, so there was, well, maybe not as lucky, but 0, 4, 4, but 2 fails. So the militia unit gets a disruption, and they do get reduced. They didn't fire, so I'll put them off to the side just a little bit, so I know that that's 2 separate issues. If they had both been suffering for the same thing, I could make 1 single stack. But again, the hexes are good enough that I can just kind of offset it a little bit. Alright, but that BTR fired. Now the Ural truck did not fire, so I'm just going to try to grab a bunch of markers to make this happen. So we'll just put that there so we know that they fired. And the Ural truck has no combat capability on its own. So to go back to the militia player, I think we're done. I could bring on... I could bring Ledetta on, and she could attack the truck. Boom, surprise, ambush, and I'll have them attack. So she will attack this truck. So she's got a combat factor of 6. This is short range, so she gets 1 shift to the right. They're in the open, so there's no defense. So they're starting on a 6, 1 shift there on the 8 column. So she's going to roll a die 10. She rolls a 1. Excellent. So 1 on the 8. That is 6 hits against that truck. What did I say that was? 6 hits. Okay, I've got, the game comes with 6 die 10. So perfect. Here we go. And their morale is a 4 now. Oh, I just totally blew away stuff. 4, 3... Okay, that was a 4. That's a 0. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that just shot right out of there, didn't it? Well, my goodness, they are getting some lucky rolls. So that URL, the Ural truck, is reduced and disrupted. So now this entire stack is of reduced vehicles disrupted. So I'll just have them all share one marker. And I'm running out of fired markers, but I found another one. So we'll say that's Ledetta there. All right, so what we'll do is say that that's all the firing that's going to happen, because this woods block them. They're not going to be able to shoot. This tank can't shoot. And we'll go ahead and say they're going to do some close combat. This BRDM could probably do some more shooting. I don't think he's shot anything yet, but for the moment we'll call that good, just for the purposes of moving along here. Now that that fire combat has happened, the next step would be to do the movement phase. So almost to close assault. Now the reason why movement is important next is because normally in order to do close assault you have to be adjacent to the unit you want to close assault. Lycans and vampires and zombies are a little unique in that when they move, they ignore zones of control. So they're going to move into a hex with the opponent to do attacking. I guess maybe I should have had them spawn here technically, but they were in a woods hex, so I had them spawn on top of the vehicle. And they'll go ahead and do our demonstration purpose for close assault. Now, because it's the movement phase, oops, I just bumped the camera, I could move some of these units around, because the idea is to get victory points by moving off the map. I want to get as many trucks off as possible, but this here stack of a truck and a BTR 70, they're going to try and book it through the woods maybe, avoid all of this. So what we do is we have to look at the chart, because every vehicle has a certain amount of move factors, and that's this value right here on the bottom. So the BTR has an 8, and the Euro truck has an 8 as well. The problem is, oh no, actually it's good, because they're both kind of wheeled vehicles anyway. So we just have to look at vehicle values. So woods for a vehicle, AFV, it's a 2. So every time they drive through woods, that's 2 of their movement factors. Easy enough, and you don't have to worry about heading or facing or anything like that, because it's a platoon, so the vehicles are just kind of making their way through. We're going to go around. Again, this isn't for strategy, but just to kind of demonstrate some rules here. So we're going to go 2, 4, 6, we'll go here, 7, 8. Kind of move them away from danger a little bit and then have them drive through. So we would mark them with moved. Might not be the smartest thing, but just showing how things go. Oh, they moved off the camera just a little bit. Great, so I'd mark them with a moved. I then have these tanks that could do something. So there's a stack over here of things. So maybe they don't have the best close assault factor. It's only a 4. Infantry do better than them, because infantry will swarm the tank with Molotovs and explosives. But they'll still move around. Maybe they can shoot at something later. Oh, and so where fire is alternating with movement, one side moves everything and then the other side. And so the Soviet player had the initiative, so they're going to move first. What's the movement effect here? That is some cultivated. It's a 1 as well. Excellent. So we're going to drive around so we can eventually pour some point-blank firepower into there. I just don't know if I want to close assault. Disrupted gets to defend themselves. You know, that might not be too bad. We could try that. The tank might be able to shoot in there. We'll give it a try. 1, 2. And they get a move. All right. Yeah, and we'll just leave that as it is. All right, so that's what we want to take a look at next. So you would do movement, and then if the Lycan player had anything to move, they would move. And then once all the movement is done, we can move on to close assault phase. So we'll get ready for that next. Now, before we pop into the combat, just to address a couple of questions that you may have had, is when the unit up here with the BTR and the truck moved past Ledetta here, there was no zone of control check, because champions don't exert a zone of control. but the non-disrupted combat units exert a zone of control, meaning it costs an extra movement point to move through the hex that's adjacent to them, because maybe they're dodging fire. It's just, a little more cautious movement. And that's why they got their full movement up around. Now, one thing that armored vehicles can do if they've got combat values greater than 1 is they could overrun. So I could, if I had thought about it, which I did think about it, is drive through a unit and pass through like we're trying to bust through. Problem is, you can only do an overrun on clear or hill or cultivated hexes. And this unit is in a woods hex, if you can kind of tell without me moving it all around. So overrun wouldn't have worked in that, which is why the tank is going to stop there just for regular close assault. Overrun would have gave them a chance to maybe bust through, or I could just simply continue to drive around, pay a zone of control cost, but we're going to close assault just to show all of that. So those are some things that you may have been wondering, why didn't you do? Now with that out of the way, we'll go ahead and resolve some close assault. We're going to start with the Lycan because that's the one that's the most fun. Is werewolves are super crazy strong. They have a really good close assault factor, and when you play a ferocity card, which is one of my favorites when playing Lycans, is they actually get to reduce armored vehicles, not just disrupt them and call it good, but they can reduce. And when you do close assault, it's attacking everything. So all the damage that they do will be split among those units. So it's really cool. Now to do this, you add up all the close assault of the participating units and you compare as a ratio. So what we have here for the Lycan is 16 close assault, and then the 2 tanks have 4 each, so that's 8 total. So boom, big battle. And that's a 2-to-1 for the Lycan player. Now on our combat chart down here, there's a close assault table. So with that in mind, it's 2-to-1 for the Lycan player, and it would be 1-to-2 for the defender. Well, actually it really doesn't matter at this point because they're going to roll on this one chart. Because when you do close assault, one person will kind of declare a close assault to happen, and then the other person will declare one. So close assaults kind of alternate as well. So in this case, the Lycan is attacking, and he is definitely 2-to-1. And we're going to do the same thing. You roll a die. Let's see if you can see what we roll. And of course, he wants to roll low. Roll 3. That's respectable. And we go to that 2-to-1. Now this is split, so the 2 will be against the attacker and 6 hits against the defender. Alright, let's roll here. So 2 for the Lycan. Now, Lycan players, if he had failed, what's nice is Lycan players reduce the first successful hit, like the non-blocked hit, because they're super strong. They have this shield icon, and so if one of these had failed, I would have blocked it anyway, because puny guns and things like that don't hurt werewolves, right? But the 3 and the 4 are both saves anyway, so the Lycan player just shrugged off all those hits. Now we're going to make 6 rolls for those tanks. So let's see if we can make some good hits here. Oh man, these dice are just way too friendly. So the 3 is a save, the 1 is a save. Now if we hadn't played that card, the 4 would have been a hit normally. Well, unfortunately for the Lycan player, very unfortunately, that just results in 2 things that weren't saved. That means a disrupt is applied to both vehicles. So no reductions, but they are reduced. They would have to make rally checks to see if that bothers them. Well, that's kind of disappointing. I almost want to play that out some more because I really want to see some Russian tanks get blowed up. Then here is a more traditional close assault where, well, what we do is they're disrupted. So they're disrupted. They can't initiate it. But the RPG, they fired, so they can't initiate. Plus they have an asterisk, so they can't initiate close assault either. So there would be technically none other for the Lycans because they're all not eligible. But we could say that the T60 here is going to go ahead and attack. Now, disrupted units, they defend with half of their close assault, minimum of 1. We'll drop fraction, so the militia will have 1, and the RPG unit has 2, so that's a grand total of 3. And the 4, that's pretty much like a 1-to-1. That's actually not so good. It could be good. It really just depends on how we roll. So let's find out. So the attacker rolls a 2. That's actually pretty good. So 1-to-1. Well, 3-to-5. Okay, so not so good. So it's possible that the tank might hurt itself a lot more. So it's going to make 3, and then the group over here is going to make 5. So they're saving on 4. So the tank does disrupt itself. So we'll put a disruption on it. And then the Lycan player over here is going to make 5 saves. So grab 5 dice. Let's see if they all stay in. Alright, 0 is good. 4 is good. 4 is good. 3 is good. Oh, these dice are very, very friendly. So we already had this militia unit was disrupted. Hits need to be equally distributed, so if one's disrupted and the other isn't, they both have to be disrupted. So we don't have to worry about those being split so much anymore. We'll just say that whole stack is disrupted. So that just kind of disrupted them. Alright, so just to kind of move along, we'll say that that was all the close assault. That's all the gunnery we can do. Not a lot of long-range gunnery when it's all up close here in the woods. So I gotta discard that ferocity card. I do have another ferocity card here that I want to play. The Lycan also has a burst of speed. Fueled by rage, the Lycan put on an inhuman burst of speed. A Hex of Lycan moves it twice there. Well, they're already there, so not much need for that now. We need better cards, like ones that will let them go again. Oh, and when they do close assault, I did forget to mark that participants with fired because now they've participated in combat. So if I had a card that could remove the fired status, they could probably close assault again, but I don't. Alright, so the next phase after fire, after movement, we're done with close assault. Housekeeping, we clean up all these markers and get rid of the moved, all the fired. Disrupted stay, but those fired are gone. And I can tidy that up a little bit there and clean off the board. Alright, oh, there's a red one I saw hiding. Alright, housekeeping is pretty much done. Then it's aid and focus. Aid and focus are 2 of my favorite markers. So I think we mentioned this before. The Warsaw Pact and NATO player, they get an aid and a focus. And this aid allows you to make rerolls on the morale checks or the rally checks to get rid of disruption. And then focus is going to let you add extra dice to combat rolls or initiative. Now, I didn't place these earlier. I could have, because if I had simulated, say, 2 turns to get here for movement purposes, they would have generated some of these aid and focus. But I'll put them on here now since that's the next step. So I'm going to look for a spot where the Soviet player wants to undisrupt. So he wants to undisrupt that stack. Then, because the Soviet player really wants the initiative so they can start trying to run away from all of this, he's going to put his focus here in the initiative box, which is off the table. So that's aid and focus. And the Lycan player, vampires, all of those other factions, they don't get aid and focus, just NATO and Warsaw Pact. Now that aid and focus is done, we advance the turn marker. Again, that's off the table. And we would come around to a new turn. So we'll just kind of zip through a turn. I've got my 2 dice here. Roll for initiative is step 1, which clearly NATO got that. Or I should say the Lycan player, they're not quite NATO. So I just flipped a turn marker to remind me that they're going to go first on certain things. And next would be the draw. So the Lycan player draws a regenerate. Ooh, return Lycan to undisrupted full strength. Which is great because Lycans already have a regeneration ability. But that would just let me play it immediately. I don't have to wait for that to happen. The NATO player draws a card. They draw Eager. Subtract 1 from a rally attempt die roll. Play after die is rolled. Oh, alright. So we have this card, which will rally 1 unit automatically, and this one lets me subtract 1 from a die roll. And I get to play it after the die roll is rolled. Excellent. Well, after we have our cards, it is now the rally phase. So I'm going to play a rally. So I guess I could have just played the rally card on that stack, but we'll play the rally automatically here and discard that one. So they're good. This was a Lycan stack. These tanks. Alright, well, I can only disrupt 1 unit in here. I wouldn't be able to undo both unless I had played, both cards on that stack. So I undisrupted that tank. So we're going to do 1 here. I subtract 1 from the roll. Now remember, that effect of 4 morale is gone. That was just for the last turn. So they're back down to a 3. So I do get to subtract 1 from the roll, which I don't have to play because it said you play after it's rolled. So one of those tanks is undisrupted. Let's see if the other one is undisrupted. They rolled a 4. This is a perfect example of why this card's good. I subtract 1 to the die roll to make it a 3 morale, which is what they now have, and boom. Both tanks undisrupted, ready for action, card gone. Then we're going to do this stack here. But again, we can only do 1, so we're going to try and save the truck because the truck is going to try to drive out of there. So he's going to roll. Rolls a 6. Well, good thing I placed the aid marker because he's going to make that roll again. And that was even worse. So they were not able to undisrupt. Then the Lycan player has some to try to undisrupt as well. There's 2 units in here that are disrupted, so we'll roll for the militia. They don't have any cards to modify that. Well, let's look. Yes, they do. Because the militia part of the Lycans, they can play the top card. Target 1 rally clan. So I'm looking here, there's cover, which I probably should have looked at these earlier. The clan knows the city and land like no other. They are able to find cover where others find none. Ignore the first 2 non-negated hits for this attack. Well, that would have been good if I had thought to use that. I was just focused on the Lycan part. But here's Incite. Clan foments resentment against Germany's occupiers. Place an armed mob in a hex adjacent to a clan combatant. Ooh, so you could bring in extra people there, armed mob. So we're going to play this rally. And it says rally target clan unit. We're going to rally the RPG because that one is full strength and I forgot to take his fire out. He can hurt stuff a little bit better than a reduced militia. Okay, so I'm going to roll for that militia unit. So rally card is discarded. Roll 4 or less. Yeah, these dice are super forgiving. So they're back in action. Then we had over here a disrupted RPD unit. So it's going to roll. No cards for them. It's an 8. So that one still stays disrupted. Alright. And they're going to keep their cards here. Then you go to the fire phase, and we just kind of repeat through again. Oop, Lycan is still here. We would go back to shooting, which we'll go ahead and take a couple of shots. So we had a BTR leave to go north and head around. But it's the Lycans that get to go first this time. So we're going to take advantage of that RPG. Since this whole stack is disrupted, they can't initiate attacks. But we have a Ural truck and a BTR. So we're going to try and, I guess since our focus really is to capture trucks, instead of firing at the escort, which is important to do, we're just going to fire straight at the truck. So let's put the truck on top. So that's the focus of this RPG attack. Now, because we're going to add this militia to the attack, since they are reduced, they only provide a 1 column shift to the right. So we're starting with 4 firepower. Now, this -4, really bad for the Ural truck because that means it adds the value. So it's actually going to be starting with an 8 armor piercing factor attack. Crazy, huh? Yeah, Ural trucks are weak. And we're going to get 1 column shift to the right and another column shift for short range. So if we go here, 8, 2 column shifts is on the 12, they're in the open. There's no woods to protect them at all. So we're going to roll a die. Let's see. They roll a 6 average. So roll a 6 over to the 12. That's only 5 dice roll. 2, 3. Tell you, the Soviet column here is getting very lucky. Well, you look at that. So many saves, but 2 that were not saved. That means the Ural truck is reduced and disrupted. These guys are not, so I'm just going to stick them on top like so. And this whole stack is going to get marked with fired. And I forgot to remove that moved marker off that there tank unit. Wowzer. Okay, so the Lycan fired. Then it's going to go back here to the Soviet player. And we want to, since that's disrupted, we're going to go ahead and use these BRDMs to, well, there's only these 2 BRDMs. They're stacked together to attack here. So they're starting with a 6. 2 column shifts because that's a full strength unit. Short range is 1 more, so that's 3 shifts. So they'd start with the 6, make 3 shifts. 6, 1, 2, 3. The leg unit is in woods, so that's 2 back. So we start at 6, 1, 2, 3 shifts, 1, 2 back. So we're rolling on the 8. Alright, 6. Cross to the 8, that's 3. Alright, so the Lycan player has to make 3 saves. They still maintain a 4 morale. They only get 1 fail. So now both in here are disrupted. Like I said, these particular dice rolls today have been very forgiving. Usually I roll a lot worse than that. And they marked fired. Then we'll go back to the militia player. We got a truck here. Let's go for this truck. So we're not going to attack the BRDM. We don't have an anti-tank value, but we do have militia. They can fire at the truck. So they're going to take their 4 firepower here, because the trucks again can be attacked with either value. They just seem more susceptible to big tank rounds than, say, machine gun fire. But they are starting at a 4. It is adjacent, so that's going to be 1 column shift to the right. And they could, here's something kind of advanced, is they could actually, we could start with this person, and let's start here. You got to be adjacent or same square to fire together. But what we can do later is, if this person doesn't get disrupted, is they could then later fire and get a flanking bonus because they're not on an adjacent spine to this attack. So let's try that. So we're going to attack with Ledetta first with her big fancy rifle. So she's got 6. So she'll start at 6 and she'll get her 1 shift to the right for being short range. Yeah, let's do that. So she'll be rolling on the 8 column. And it's a 1. That's great. So 1 on the 8. 6 potential hits. So her picture of whatever gun that is, I don't know if that's an RPD or what, but that thing is lighting that truck up. And that truck only has a 3 morale now. Ran out of vodka power. And that's 1 save. They no longer get that fancy 4 and the 2. So 2 saves. This is what I'm used to seeing. That's 4 hits that we directed at the truck. And the first hit would disrupt it. Second hit would reduce it. Third hit eliminates it. We'll stick a wreck in there because those trucks are now smoldering wrecks. And we get a fired marker stuck on Ledetta. Boom. Then the Soviet player. Now the Soviet player is thinking, they could close assault with this militia. And that person's already fired. So we're going to go ahead and shoot at the militia. So they have a high explosive factor of 6. So they're going to start on the 6. They're going to get no assistance from the wreck. And they're going to go ahead and get 1 column shift. So they'll be on the 8 as well because they're adjacent. So they're hoping to roll low. They want to get some revenge. 6 on the 8. That's only 3. So the militia player will roll 3. Their morale is 4. They do get disrupted. They made 2 saves. They get disrupted. They don't have body armor, so they don't shrug that one off. But he gets marked fired. And we look, there's a BTR 70 with the infantry on it, which we could go ahead. Yeah, let's do it. So remember, the infantry add 2 because they're mounted firing out ports. So that's 8. It's adjacent, so they get 1 shift. They're going to attack the RPG unit. So I'm just going to uncover that to remind myself it's the RPG unit. Okay, so we said it was 8, 1 shift to the right for being adjacent. So they're rolling on the 10. So they might do really, really well. 5, run across to the 12 here, which is 6. So yeah, that's really, really good. That RPG unit has 4 morale. Let's see how they do. They get 1 save, 2 save, 3 save. Unfortunately, there's 3 unaccounted for hits. So they get a disruption, they would then get reduced, and then another one would wipe them out. So the RPG unit, sadly, I believe they fired earlier, so oops. They, I think I took, no, they participated, right. So this fired is for that leftover unit, and then they're fired. And then that would leave the T-64. See, things tend to go a little bit quicker once you start to get to a rhythm. So they have a 10, so very, very strong. They're firing a big high explosive shell out of these 125 millimeter guns. Point blank is 1 shift. So that's going to go from 10 straight. Oh, you know what? I forgot to make 2 shifts for defense. I knew I was forgetting something. The woods do offer protection. Great. So in that effort to kind of hurry through to show stuff, already forgot something. So we'll leave it. So that was a terrible example, but I do remember it here. So 10, 1 shift for being close range, and 2 shifts back for woods. Can't believe I forgot the woods. So we'll roll on the 8 column against that remaining unit. It's a 3. That's a pretty good hit. 3, go to the 8. 5 hits. Here come 5 dice. They're already reduced, so that's going to be potentially very bad for them. Yes, that's bad, because they only made 1 save. So that leftover militia unit is gone. So basically, if you play this, don't worry about the escorts. Go right for the trucks. The escorts are good for absorbing hits from like close assault, because the close assault numbers are spread evenly. But we ended up with so many units fired and not really eligible for close assault that the Lycan's going to really help out. Alright, so we'll say all combat's done. So we'll just move that fired marker there. So we did not close combat, but all the fire phase is done. We would do movement. This BTR up here, we're just going to move them along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They are rushing across. So they're going to get some victory points. Then the Lycan player is actually fine where he's at. So we'll say that movement's done. Go back to close assault. We have ferocity. So we're going to play that again on the Lycan. And RPG unit's gone. We'll come back here. It's against that whole stack. So it's that 2-to-1 thing again. Let's do some magic. Well, I'll keep the 1, even though it fell out of the tray. So 1 on 2-to-1 odds is great. 1 for the Lycan, 7 for the defenders. So we'll roll for the Lycan. Man, they're just jumping out of here. So he rolled a 1. So he is fine. The Lycan took no damage. Now we're going to take 6 dice, add another one for 7. Every 3. Oh my goodness. Wow. Oh, I can't kill any tanks. So that's a save. That's a save. That's a save. That's a save. Anyway, so 2 disruptions are applied equally, and there you go. Now, just to show something that could have happened, I mean, I was really hoping to reduce some tanks down, because to me that would have been cool, but apparently tanks are still pretty strong against Lycan claws and ferocity. if this had been maybe the BT, well, the BTRs are a 4 as well. The trucks are pretty much, trucks would have been tore up because I'm looking, they got a 1. So that would have been a better combination. So maybe attacking 2 tanks with a Lycan. Just the dice rolls weren't with me. But let's say we had a truck in here with a tank. So we'll just take a look at an example. So let's say the Lycan, maybe I spawned the Lycan back here and he jumped in with these weaker vehicles, you know, well, the BTR that was maybe escorting a truck. And then you had to do that hit disruption. Well, let's roll again and see if we get better results. Alright, so we rolled our 6, let's say it was 6 hits, we take out the saves, so there. Now we end up in this example, 4 hits. That's all I've been looking for. Now, let's say he didn't play the ferocity, so he can't step reduce the tank. Well, you still go through the progression of assigning hits equally like you would with artillery. It's just that because the Lycan can't step reduce the tank wouldn't reduce, but it would still take the hit. So each one would take 1 hit for disruption, so that would apply. And then there's 2 hits left over. So again, you apply equally. 1 hit would apply to the tank, but it can't reduce. 1 hit would apply to the Ural truck, it can reduce. Now, let's say we had had 5 hits. So at this point, there is 1 unassigned hit. What you would do is you could just assign that extra hit randomly. So you might say odds on the tank, evens on the truck. So I would roll, and I rolled odds on the tank. So the tank would still absorb that hit because it can't be reduced. So the Lycan is in there, they're swinging, they're attacking. Some of them are just pounded on the tank, and a couple of them went over and attacked the truck. But that escort is exactly why it's with the truck. It can absorb some hits that the truck can't take. So if you were doing this scenario, just a friendly tip, and it took me a couple games to get this down. Don't put 2 trucks together because then nothing is absorbing anything, and the Lycan would have just reduced all of that. Well, that was a lot happening. I tried to play through it a little quickly to cut down on time, but even this is still kind of a lengthy demonstration video. But I hope that gives you some basic ideas of how the mechanics work and gives you a look at the Lycan characters. They are very tough, and like I said, I probably put them in a bad spot, but I just really wanted to see Lycans tear tanks apart, but dice rolls were just not with me. But that does give you an introduction to some ideas of movement. I did skip that a little bit to get us right into combat, but the basics again of that are, you know, you have a certain amount of movement factors on your counter, and as you move into a hex, you're going to reduce your movement factors by the amount listed here on the movement chart. First number is for leg units, second number is for armored units. It says AFVs, armored fighting vehicles, but essentially vehicles. And when you are reading the chart, don't forget to check any subnotes, because sometimes that's great reminders for you. And then combat, the color bands. Now this again was an example of just up close combat. Everything was adjacent, and adjacent values are going to give you 1 column shift to the right on everything, because fire is a lot more accurate when you're just looking right at them. And certain things you do will give you positive column shifts, and then certain things you do will give you negative column shifts, such as firing with another unit. We didn't get a chance to demonstrate flanking fire, but flanking fire will also give you 1 column shift to the right. Now, with flanking fire, that's not simultaneous, but I didn't pull the marker out because I didn't think I would have it. But if you end up then with like 2 units opposite a target, you can put the little flanking fire reminder to say that the next unit will get a flanking fire bonus. So yeah, and then the combat, first hit is a disruption that you can rally off with a card or in the rally phase, and then once that's gone, the next step will reduce a unit, and that will never come back. And then if it's disrupted and reduced and takes another hit, you can then remove that unit. When you attack, you're going to attack a singular unit in the hex, unless you say it's artillery or in this case close assault, then it's everybody fighting and shooting at once. And you mark units that fire or close assault with a fired marker. Moved units will get a move marker. And not only are they helpful reminders, but some actions, well, cards, I don't have one here to show you, but there are some cards that would let you remove a fired marker, and maybe that unit could fire again. So lots of little things that can pop up for you, but I'm hoping that gives you a much better understanding of how the game plays. Thank you very much for watching, and we will see you next time.